Welcome. Today we read a passage of St. John's Gospel. Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. A large crowd followed him because they saw the signs he was performing on the sick. Jesus went up the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish feast of Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw that a large crowd was coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" He said this to test him, because Jesus knew himself what he was going to do. Philip answered and said, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good are these among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people recline." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place. So the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much of the fish as they wanted. And when they had their fill, he said to the disciples, "Gather the fragments left over, so nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves, more than they could eat. When the people saw the signs he had done, they said, "This is truly the prophet, the one who is to come into the world." Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off to make him king, and he withdrew again to the mountain alone. The Gospel of the Lord. It's interesting how this passage begins, that the people followed him because of the signs he was performing among the sick. They were attracted to Jesus by his miracles. They were more spectators, probably hoping that they may have a miracle performed on them. But most of them went to see, to look at the signs. And what Jesus invites us to is to be participants, to be partners in a way, to walk the journey of our life, knowing that he's with us and working through us and in us, and to witness to that. And of course, I'm much more like the crowd. I keep looking to see what signs. When I want to know what God's will is, or if my prayer is valid, whether it's making any impression or headway, I judge how I feel. And really, prayer is trying to acknowledge God's presence, which is already there, to renew my faith, to commitment, to live God's presence today in my life. I think of this scene and put myself in the middle of it, as often happens. And the disciples didn't have a clue either. How are we going to feed them? They were concerned, but they would prefer to send the people back home. I see the problem. I have a certain amount of compassion, but it's really not mine to deal with. Send them home. And Jesus says, "What have you got to feed them?" And they said, "Well, there's a kid here delivering some food, not enough though." And Jesus says, "Have them sit down. We'll take care of it." And then he has the disciples distribute the food. Now, my point is that if I were one of the 5,000 or one of the disciples, I don't think I'd have a clue what was happening until it was all over. I could see myself sitting there saying, "What's he going to do with these few loaves of bread and fish among so many? This is crazy, but hey, he knows what he's doing, I guess. But this isn't going to work." And then after it was over, and they gathered the 12 baskets, and that 5,000 went home satisfied, I would think among the 5,000 and the disciples, all of a sudden they say, another sign. God was really present then, and we didn't notice it. I was too busy handing out food or eating. I was too busy with my needs. That's how it reminds me of how essential prayer is. Recollecting, stopping, not anticipating in the future or even the moment, but to look back in my journey and see there was God. I know in that level of faith, not in the experiential level of immediacy, but in that reflecting back that I have experienced God, that He's always with me, that He's always working through the most ordinary means. Perhaps the most ordinary means is me. That if I just open myself to try to be what Jesus wants me to be, a compassionate, loving person, and then somewhere, even though the odds seem overwhelming, even though the situation may be crazy, so I believe God is there. I don't have to solve it. I don't have to figure it out. I have to live it as a witness of God's presence. It reminds me of several years ago now when I was active as a pastor, and I went to take communion to a man whom I normally didn't bring communion to. I had never met him before, and he had had over a dozen surgeries for cancer. And he was going in for what would turn out to be his final. And I brought him communion, and I chatted with him a little bit. And then all of a sudden, I said to him, wow, all these surgeries, you must have strong faith in God. And he said with total humility and simplicity, yes, I do believe in God. I just hope He knows what He's doing. And I thought that was a great statement of faith. I believe God's present, but going into my 13th or 14th surgery, I hope He knows what He's doing, because it isn't working, at least not according to my standards. And when I went to the wake of the man, and when he passed on, I said to his wife, now he's at peace. Now he knows God's presence. That's what we need to do. I believe God is here, but right now, I hope He knows what He's doing. It may not be my way, but I'm not here to impose on God my way, but I'm here to try to listen and reflect and see that God has been here, that He's been doing His will, and that He's always showing me His presence in the ordinariness of my own life. I hope your day is satisfactory and happy, and that you continue to pray for one another. God bless.